My name is Elizabeth Simpfenderfer, and this is my informative speech, and here is the group I'm talking to. Scan, let's see, which way? And I even have one hidden over there, way over there. So I have plenty today. And here we go. Quilting can be traced back as far as ancient Egypt. On September 30th of this year, on the website allaboutquilts.com, under the titled Information tab, then the tab Quilt History, I found this piece of information. The quilt, quote, the oldest discovery, 5,500 years ago, 35th century BC, is of an ivory carving featuring the kings or pharaoh of the Egyptian First Dynasty wearing a mantle or cloak that appears to be quilted. It was found in the Temple of Horus at Abydos in 1903 and is currently in the collection of the British Museum. Pretty interesting. However, quilting as we know it began in the New World with the arrival of the Europeans, English, and Dutch settlers. On October 2nd of this year, I found the website entitled Quilting in America by Lisa J. Allen of the University Librarian of Lubbock, Texas. It has a page called The History of Quilting, which states, the term quilt comes from the Latin quiltia, meaning a stuffed sack. The word has come to have two meanings. It is used as a noun, meaning the three-layer stitch bed covering. It is also used as a verb, meaning the act of stitching through the three layers to hold them together. Quilts were also referred to as the cloth sandwich. It includes a top with a decorative, somewhat decorative to a fine, elaborate top, a filler, and a back. Quilts, by the way, they are crafted, can tell the story of the crafter and the period in which it was made. The quilt, as we have come to know it, did not start out to be a work of art, but rather it was a necessity. Quilting in the 1800s and earlier was strictly for survival. Bed coverings, as one would imagine, to keep the family warm. Coverings for doors and windows to keep the cold out when they were not sealed well. As partitions to divide a large room into smaller areas. They were hung in wagons on the way west to keep the dust and rain out, and it also gave the Indians something else to shoot at besides the family. It also provided a little emotional well-being for women also. Putting a favorite quilt on a bed made her less homesick and add a little bit of beauty to the home. Quilting was actually a social activity for women just like a barn raising was for men. These gatherings let ladies come together to finish several quilts in a day versus months, weeks, years of doing it by yourself. These gatherings were in a way which women could improve their quilting skills, share fabric and or patterns, share family news such as births, marriages, deaths, exchange recipes, exchange child-rearing experiences, the ups and downs of life, or just to talk and laugh. During the winter months when it was not feasible to get together, they would piece their quilt tops all winter long. And so when they came together in the summer, they would have something to work on. The basic hand stitch of quilting was therapeutic and relaxing. Women found this a relief from the day-to-day chores, whether it be farming, gardening, feeding the animals, housework. As a woman stitched, she could let her mind wander, losing her thoughts, daydreaming about fantasies, travel, much like we would get lost in a book today. A woman's handiwork was a source of pride for her. After all, it was the one absolute thing she had complete control of in those days. Quilting in earlier times was done by needle and thread. Women would bind the layers together by stitching across the area to be quilted. On October 4th of this year, on wikipedia.org, under quilting, it described the way women use needle and thread to stitch her quilts, and I quote, a quilter can make one stitch at a time by first driving the needle through the fabric from the right side, then pushing it back up through the material from the wrong side to complete the stitch. This is called a stab stitch. Another option is called a rocking stitch, where the quilter has one hand, usually with a finger wearing a thimble, on the top of the quilt, while the other hand is located beneath the piece to push the needle back up. And the third option is called loading the needle, and involves doing 4 more stitches before pulling the needle through the cloth. End quote. The needle was considered a woman's tool. Every woman and female child, no matter what her social status, what part of the region she came from, they all knew how to use their needle and thread. Women also used a quilting frame. This would have been an important piece of equipment back then. On October 1st of this year, on the website wisegeek.com, what is a quilting frame? It gave this description of a quilting frame. I quote, "A quilting frame is a structure that holds the fabrics and batting of a quilt in place while the person or people working on the quilt stitch it together. Usually the frame is made of wood. To use a quilt frame, the quilter inserts the bottom fabric of the quilt, the batting, and the top fabric into the slats on the four sides of the frame. The idea of the frame is similar to that of an embroidery or quilting hoop. The four slots hold the fabrics and batting taut so that the quilter can make quilting stitches that will not pucker or be too loose when she takes the quilt out of the frame. Placing a quilt in a frame also prevents the batting or fabric from bunching up when the quilter works. Usually the entire quilt is laid flat in the frame so that the quilter will not have to undo the frame and reposition the quilt as she works, which she would have to do with a quilting hoop," end quote. With the invention of the early sewing machine in the mid-1800s came a different option in which quilters could quilt. Before electricity, you would power a sewing machine with a foot trundle or a hand crank. Not everyone had the monies to purchase these, so most quilting was still done by hand. Today, the choice of quilting by hand or machine is an individual one. Neither one is right or wrong, but just a personal preference. Many machine quilters have also hand quilted, and some of their quilts today contain both styles. In conclusion, this morning, October 6th, I found a few statements or thoughts I want to share with you from The American Quilt by Ida Vranick, done February 6, 1997, and I quote, "Quilts are not only documents of history, they are also documents of love of the country, family, and love of self. The women's lives can be read by looking at their work. They put into their quilts what they were too shy or reserved to speak aloud. Memories, aspirations, ambitions, and love. A beautiful quilt is one made with someone special in mind. Only in that case can a quilt have a heart and a soul. The soul of every quilt is the woman who made it, whether she signed it, dated it, or left its origin a mystery by doing neither. Even if those women are never known, their quilts survive as a testament that they lived and created. Women quilted to leave their mark on the world, to leave something behind, to prove that they lived, created, and mattered in the world. Thank you."